Greetings, cinema and AI lovers. Welcome to the new episode of Artifinema Cinetelligence, which is a podcast series we review retro and underrated sci-fi movies whose subject is AI and AR. Hope your week was fine and you're ready to discover a new movie. We want to inform you that this episode may contain spoilers, so listen on your own risk.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really thrilled to be diving into this particular piece of cinema today.
Yeah, it's a wild one.
It really is. I mean, when we talk about the intersection of artificial intelligence, and augmented reality, we usually look at these massive blockbusters.
Right, like Marvel or something.
Exactly, like these high-gloss Hollywood productions. But the most terrifyingly accurate prophecy of our current tech landscape didn't come from any of those. It came from an indie film that, honestly, almost nobody saw.
It's crazy to think about. I mean, imagine being offered millions of dollars to secure your desperately sick child's future, but the catch is, well, you have to sell your actual soul to a computer. Forever.
Yeah, it's a heavy premise.
You have to let a corporation digitally capture your face, your tears, your micro-expressions, and then you're contractually forbidden from ever acting again.
Which is just chilling. And that's the setup for this 2013 film, The Congress.
Yes, written and directed by the Israeli filmmaker Ari Folman.
Right, the same visionary who gave us that incredible Oscar-nominated animated documentary, Waltz with Bashir.
Oh, that movie's so good.
It's phenomenal. And, Folman is a director who's totally obsessed with memory and perception. Waltz with Bashir was all about repressed trauma, right? How the mind reconstructs history.
Yeah, and the Congress kind of takes that obsession and just hurls it into a speculative future.
Exactly. He isn't just asking how we remember the past anymore. He's asking, how will we perceive reality when technology lets us completely fabricate it?
That's the core of our deep dive today. And to really grasp the weight of this vision, I think we have to look at the sheer scale of the production, right? And its ultimate, honestly, heartbreaking reception.
We really do.
So let's lay out the groundwork for everyone listening. The movie features this incredibly meta, super vulnerable performance by Robin Wright.
Yeah, playing a fictionalized alternate reality version of herself, which is such a bold choice.
It's so bold. Yeah. And alongside her, we've got this powerhouse roster. Harvey Keitel is playing her long-suffering agent, Al.
Is brilliant in.
Danny Houston plays the terrifyingly pragmatic studio executive, Jeff Green. Then there's Cody Smith-McPhee as her son, Aaron, and Paul Giamatti as this deeply empathetic physician, Dr. Barker.
It's a cast that absolutely commands attention. I mean, these are heavy hitters.
Right, which makes the film's financial fate so fascinating. I mean, what happened there?
Well, it was a massive multinational co-production. They were pooling resources from studios in Israel, Germany, Poland, Luxembourg, France, Belgium.
Wow, all over the place.
All over. And it had an estimated budget of around 8 million euros. But when it hit theaters, it was just a profound commercial failure.
Really? How bad?
It earned a mere $356,172 at the global box office.
Oh, man. That is rough.
Yeah, the general audiences just completely bypassed it.
I look at those numbers.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder if, the marketing department just didn't know what to do with it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because half the movie's live action and the other half is this wildly hallucinogenic 2D animation.
Right.
You can't really cut a trailer for that without confusing a mainstream audience who's, expecting a traditional sci-fi thriller.
The marketing was undeniably a nightmare for them, but the critical establishment, they recognized its ambition immediately.
Yeah, it premiered at the Directors Fortnight at Cannes in 2013, didn't it?
It did, and it actually holds a solid 73% on Rotten Tomatoes based on over 100 reviews.
And a 63 on Metacritic, which isn't bad for something so weird.
Not bad at all. Furthermore, it won Best Animated Feature at the 26th European Film Awards. So the cinematic community knew Folman tapped into something vital, even if the execution was deeply polarizing.
And that brings us to our real mission for this deep dive. Because we're looking at this decade-old film because, well, it's no longer fiction.
No, it's really not.
The Congress predicted the exact existential crisis that brought Hollywood to its knees in the 2020s. And it did it with terrifying precision.
It really is uncanny.
So we're going to unpack how this movie foresaw the battle over AI likeness rights. And then we'll explore how Folman uses this jarring shift from live-action cinematography to surreal animation to blur the lines between physical reality and augmented reality.
I love that. So the narrative begins in a world that is visually muted, right? It's almost oppressively normal.
Yeah, it feels very grounded.
Exactly. It's shot with this somber, melancholic lens by the cinematographer Mikhail Englert, and we meet this fictionalized Robin Wright.
But she's not the powerhouse star we know from House of Cards.
Right. She's presented as an aging actress whose career is in terminal decline. The industry views her as capricious, unreliable, past her prime.
And Fullman gives her a very specific grounding motivation. She isn't just a diva fighting for relevancy.
No, she's a single mother.
Exactly. Her son, Aaron, is suffering from Usher syndrome. And for those who don't know, this is a devastating real-world condition that causes progressive deafness and blindness.
It's heartbreaking. Aaron's sensory world is just slowly shrinking. It's collapsing into darkness and silence.
And Robin has essentially torpedoed her own career by refusing roles and staying close to home just to care for him.
That detail is the emotional anchor of the entire narrative, because that creeping sensory deprivation of the son serves as a brilliant thematic counterpoint to the insane sensory overload that defines the second half of the film.
Oh, that's a great point. I hadn't thought of that contrast.
Yeah, it's very deliberate. But in this first act, it just establishes her extreme vulnerability. She is financially precarious and desperate for a way to secure Aaron's medical future.
And that is the exact moment the corporate machinery of Hollywood senses blood in the water.
Enter Miramax Studios.
I love that name, by the way. Miramax. Just blending Miramax and Paramount into this monolithic, inescapable corporate entity.
It's so on the nose, but it works perfectly. So Jeff Green, the studio executive played by Danny Huston, he calls Robin into his office.
And the pitch he makes is staggering. He doesn't offer her a role, he offers to buy her.
Yeah. The contract is just a masterpiece of dystopian legal maneuvering.
Let's break down the tech stuff here for our listeners who are new to this side of cinema, because Miramax wants to do something called digital scanning.
Right, let's define that, because when we say digital scanning or volumetric capture, we aren't just talking about taking a few high-res photos.
Yeah, the movie shows this process in a giant, brightly lit, spherical room. It looks like a cross between a surgical theater and a spaceship.
Exactly. In high-end cinematography, a subject is placed in a light stage surrounded by hundreds of cameras and sensors. These machines map the exact three-dimensional geometry of the face and body.
So they're creating a digital wireframe.
Yes, a hyper-realistic 3D asset. They capture the subsurface scattering of the skin, which is how light penetrates the epidermis and bounces around. That's what gives human skin its vitality. They map all these photometric properties, and then comes the CGI application.
Right, computer-generated imagery.
Exactly. Animators and software engineers take that 3D model and rig it with a virtual skeleton and digital musculature.
So they basically build a digital marionette.
That's the perfect way to describe it. A digital puppet. The human actor is no longer required to perform at all. A technician just types commands, or they use motion capture from a cheaper anonymous performer to drive the Robin Wright puppet.
Which brings us to the term everyone uses today, deepfakes. The technology in the movie is essentially a highly sanitized, corporate-owned deepfake, right?
The underlying concept is identical. Deepfakes use deep learning algorithms to study thousands of images of a person and learn how to superimpose their likeness onto another video.
But Miramax is doing something even more comprehensive. They're synthesizing a performance that never happened.
Generating emotional output purely through computational processing.
Yes. And this is where the movie shifts from a clever sci-fi concept into a straight-up horrifying documentary of the present day. I mean, when Fullman made this in 2013, it was speculation.
Pure science fiction.
But if we look at real-world events covered by outlets like Inverse and MovieWeb, the Congress accurately predicted the exact labor crisis that caused the 2023 Hollywood strikes.
The parallels are almost identical line by line. In 2023, SAG-AFTRA went on a historic strike, and one of the primary battlegrounds was the regulation of artificial intelligence and the unauthorized reproduction of actors' likenesses.
Yeah, the Inverse article breaks down the specific proposal from the studios. They literally proposed a system where background actors would be paid a one-time fee for a single day of work.
Just one day?
Just one. And during that day, the studio would scan them. Then the studio would own that scan, that digital replica, forever. They could use that person's face in any future movie, in perpetuity, without ever asking for consent or paying them another cent.
It is the exact contract Jeff Green puts on the table for Robin Wright, just scaled down to the working class of the industry. It's terrifying.
As MovieWeb noted in their retrospective, the 2023 strike validated Fullman's deepest anxieties. The studios argued that owning these assets was necessary to cut costs. The unions argued it was an existential threat to the profession of acting itself.
Because if you can populate an entire film with immortal, digitally owned background actors, how long before you replace the supporting cast?
And how long before you replace the leads?
Right. But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, okay? Because we often reflexively view the studio as the villain, but we've been using CGI to replace humans for decades.
That's true.
We use digital stunt doubles so actors don't break their necks. We use CGI to create massive crowds in epics like The Lord of the Rings. The industry has always used technology to fake reality.
Right, it's an industry built on illusion. So why is scanning an actor's face for a dramatic performance suddenly the ultimate Faustian bargain? Like selling your soul to the devil. If acting is about uncontrolled feelings, does replacing a human with a flawless, ageless AI algorithm actually destroy the fundamental art of cinema? Isn't acting just faking it anyway?
That is the philosophical crux of the film's first act. Yes, cinema relies on artifice, but there has always been a fundamental difference between using technology to simulate a dangerous stunt and using it to simulate the human soul.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, acting, at its highest level, requires what Fullman's characters call uncontrolled feelings. It is the spontaneous, unpredictable, messy collision of human experience. When an actor truly breaks down in tears on screen, we are moved because we recognize the biological and emotional truth of that moment.
So you're saying the algorithm can mimic the geometry of a tear falling down a cheek, but it can't generate the lived experience that caused the tear.
That is the distinction. The algorithm generates a statistical probability of what sadness looks like based on its training data. The human generates sadness based on a lifetime of joy and trauma.
Wow, yeah.
The Congress argues that by replacing the human with the algorithm, you aren't just changing the labor model, you are actively hollowing out the art form. You're removing the empathy that connects the audience to the screen.
And Robin fights this. She recognizes that signing the contract means the death of her authentic self. But she is eventually broken down by her agent, Al.
Harvey Keitel's performance in that scene is incredible.
The speech he gives her is one of the most devastating monologues in modern sci-fi. Because it isn't really a conversation about technology, it's a conversation about ownership and power.
There's an excellent piece of cinematic analysis from the publication Photogeny that highlights this. It shows how Al's speech connects this futuristic AI scanning directly back to the golden age of Hollywood.
The old studio system.
Exactly. Al doesn't frame the digital scan as something new. He frames it as the ultimate realization of what the studio system has always wanted. In the 1930s and 40s, actors were essentially treated as indentured servants by the major studios.
Right. The contracts back then were notoriously draconian. If you were a star at MGM or Warner Bros. In the 1930s, the studio owned you.
They owned your entire life.
They dictated what movies you made, they managed your public persona, they told you who you could marry, and they forced you into these exhausting production schedules.
Yeah.
If you rebelled, they suspended you without pay. The actor was a heavily managed piece of property.
And Fullman is suggesting that the digital scan is just a technological upgrade to that same desire for total control.
A perfectly compliant employee.
Exactly. The studios have always found the humanity of actors inconvenient. Humans get pregnant, they struggle with addiction, they demand equitable pay, they age.
They have opinions.
Right. The digital avatar solves all of those corporate headaches. It is an actor who is literal legal property.
And the way Al sells this to Robin is deeply insidious. He weaponizes the industry's own misogyny against her.
He really does.
He talks about how the camera is cruel to aging women. He brings up actresses who have been facelifted to death, trying to maintain the impossible, flawless standard of youth that Hollywood demands.
He pitches the digital scan as a liberation.
Yeah. He tells her, sign this and you never have to worry about aging again. Your digital self will be forever young, forever beautiful.
It is a dark, twisted logic. Yeah. It takes the very real trauma of ageism in the entertainment industry and offers a cure that actually requires the complete eradication of the woman's identity. She achieves immortality, but only by ceasing to exist as a working artist.
And this culminates in the actual scanning sequence, which is just, it's heartbreaking.
It's so sterile.
Robin is standing inside that massive clinical sphere. The technicians aren't treating her like an artist. They're treating her like a malfunctioning piece of hardware. Yeah. They give her these blunt prompts. Look happy, look angry, look sad.
And she freezes.
Right. She cannot produce an authentic human emotion in that environment on command. It feels too mechanical.
The mechanism of capture demands quantifiable data, but human emotion is inherently unquantifiable. The technicians get frustrated because the machine can't scan what she refuses to emit.
So it requires an intervention from Al.
Yes. Al steps up to the microphone and begins to tell Robin a deeply personal, intensely tragic story from their past. He bypasses the mechanical prompts and triggers her actual visceral trauma.
And as she breaks down, as she begins to genuinely weep from the pain of this memory, the technicians start snapping the photos. The strobes are flashing.
They capture her profound human sorrow and instantly convert it into ones and zeros.
It is the final, authentic performance of her life. And it is immediately commodified. They basically stole her soul while she was grieving.
It is a profound commentary on extraction. The studio extracts her lived experience to fuel their algorithm, leaving the physical woman behind as an empty husk.
And with that final flash of the camera, the film concludes its first act and prepares to execute one of the most jarring narrative and aesthetic leaps in cinema history.
It's a massive shift.
We jump 20 years into the future, and the world has radically changed. The digital avatar of Robin Wright, the data they captured in that sphere, has become a massive global phenomenon.
She stars in a sprawling, lowbrow action franchise called Rebel Robot Robin.
The studio kept its promise. The avatar is forever young, forever compliant, and highly profitable.
Meanwhile, the physical Robin Wright has spent those 2 decades living in total obscurity. She lives near an airport in a house that feels totally disconnected from the passage of time.
She's aging naturally, tending to her son whose condition has worsened, completely divorced from the digital ghost that wears her face on billboards across the world.
But the 20-year contract is up.
Yes, so Miramount Studios invites the real Robin to a massive event called the Futurological Congress. This takes place in a restricted zone known as Artifinema City, ostensibly to renew her contract and unveil their next phase of technological domination.
It's such a wild setup.
By the way, if you liked and interested so far, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It's really important for us to continue this series.
Yes, and her journey to Artifinema City is the threshold where the film just abandons objective reality entirely.
Totally.
To enter this restricted zone, Robin's car must pass through a heavily guarded checkpoint. And the toll for entry is not monetary, it is pharmacological.
She is handed a small ampoule containing a complex chemical compound. She has to drink it.
And the moment that drug crosses the blood-brain barrier, the cinematography fundamentally shatters.
The live-action photography instantly vanishes. We are suddenly plunged into a wild, chaotic, intensely colorful 2D animation.
It is an incredibly disorienting shift.
We have entered the animated zone, which is essentially a shared, chemically induced hallucination.
And it is crucial to examine the specific artistic choices Fullman and his animation director, Yoni Goodman, made here.
Let's get into the cinematography of it.
Okay, so in a film that spends its first hour critiquing the hyper-realistic 3D CGI scanning of human beings, you might expect the futuristic second half to be animated in the style of something like Avatar.
Right, like a flawless, photorealistic 3D illusion. We usually call that 3D animation or motion capture, where it mimics real physics and depth perfectly.
Exactly. But Fullman explicitly rejects that modern aesthetic.
Instead of looking like a cutting-edge video game, the animation looks deliberately retro. It is flat, 2D animation, basically hand-drawn. Why use a style from the 1930s to depict the technology of the 2030s?
The photogeny analysis provides a brilliant lens for this.
Yeah.
By utilizing traditional 2D animation, Fullman is making a deliberate statement about the nature of the reality the characters are experiencing. Well, 3D animation attempts to simulate objective reality, right? It simulates lighting, physics, mass, and depth. It tries to trick the eye into believing the digital object physically exists.
Right, wants to be real.
But 2D animation, on the other hand, embraces its own artificiality. It is inherently subjective.
So the 2D style is telling the audience, do not trust what you're seeing. This isn't a physical place. This is a mindscape.
Exactly. The world of Artifinema City has abandoned any pretense of physical truth. It is a world governed entirely by imagination, desire, and chemical manipulation.
And the animators actually rotoscoped some of the scenes, right?
Yes, meaning they filmed the actors on a live-action stage and then drew over the frames. But they rendered it with this incredibly surreal, fluid, almost unstable aesthetic. The environment bends, shifts, and morphs constantly.
The visual inspirations are just as chaotic, You can clearly see the influence of the Fleischer Studios from the 1930s.
Oh, heavily.
Fleischer gave us Betty Boop and Popeye. Their animation was famous for the rubber hose style, where limbs would stretch and contort impossibly, and inanimate objects would suddenly grow faces and dance.
It was a gritty, urban, surrealist approach to animation that constantly broke the laws of physics.
You also see heavy shades of Tex Avery, the legendary Warner Bros.
Animator?
Known for his manic pacing and aggressive subversion of visual logic. Like, a character's eyes might literally pop out of their skull and shatter like glass.
Right. Fullman uses these historical styles to convey a sense of psychological unmooring. In the animated zone, the laws of gravity, biology, and logic have been entirely suspended by the drugs.
It also strongly reminds me of Japanese anime, specifically the work of Satoshi Kon.
Oh, definitely.
His 2006 film Paprika deals with a very similar concept. In Paprika, a machine that allows therapists to enter dreams is stolen, and the collective unconscious of the city spills out into the real world. It results in this massive, overwhelming parade of random objects, religious icons, and pop culture figures marching through the streets. When Robin enters the Congress, she is hit with that exact same kind of aesthetic overload.
The similarity is profound because both films are dealing with a crisis of shared delusion. In Artifinema City, the chemicals allow people to completely customize their physical appearance.
They aren't just wearing avatars.
No, their brains are wired to perceive themselves and everyone around them as these avatars. You look to your left, and a man perceives himself as Jesus Christ. You look to your right, and a woman is manifesting as a Cubist Picasso painting.
Another person is chosen to be Michael Jackson. Hey, listener, do you have any other idea or question about this? Please write in comments.
It's fascinating. The film posits a terrifying consequence of this absolute freedom. In this animated utopia, humanity has seemingly achieved total self-actualization. You can be whatever you desire.
But if identity is merely a chemical costume you put on in the morning, does identity mean anything at all?
That's the question.
If everyone is a god, a celebrity, or a cartoon, the concept of a stable, recognizable human self just disintegrates. The individual dissolves into a chaotic sea of manufactured tropes.
Which sets the stage for the massive philosophical revelation of the film. To understand the mechanism behind this animated zone, we have to look at the source material.
Because Fullman didn't invent this concept out of thin air.
No, he based the entire second half of the movie on a 1971 novel called The Futurological Congress, written by the legendary Polish science fiction author Stanislaw Lem.
Stanislaw Lem is a titan of the genre.
He really is, operating on the same philosophical plane as writers like Philip K. Dick. Lem was deeply preoccupied with the limitations of human cognition and the ways in which advanced technology might fundamentally rewrite our perception of the universe.
I've had a great breakdown of the novel on the blog A Sky of Books and Movies. In Lem's original 1971 story, the protagonist, Aijan Tichy, is at a conference in Costa Rica, and a violent rebellion breaks out outside the hotel. But to suppress the riot, the government doesn't send in tanks. They drop bombs filled with potent psychotropic hallucinogens.
The entire population is thrown into a chemical stupor.
Tichy is eventually frozen and wakes up decades later in what Lem brilliantly calls a crypto-chemocracy.
A crypto-chemocracy. It is a concept that is even more relevant today than it was in 1971.
Let's break that down.
Okay, so let us break down the terminology. Democracy is ruled by the people, and autocracy is ruled by one. A crypto-chemocracy is a hidden, invisible dictatorship maintained entirely through pharmacology.
So the state doesn't need secret police, surveillance cameras, or prisons.
Exactly. They control the population by controlling their brain chemistry.
If the citizens are living in abject poverty, sleeping in the mud, the government just introduces a chemical into the water supply that makes them hallucinate they're living in a five-star hotel.
The physical reality of the oppression remains, but the psychological perception of it is erased. The citizens are perfectly compliant because they believe they're in paradise.
And Ari Fullman takes Lem's geopolitical critique and brilliantly maps it onto the Hollywood studio system and the modern tech industry.
At the Congress, Jeff Green takes the stage, now appearing as a wildly exaggerated animated version of himself, and unveils Miramount's ultimate master plan.
The studio has merged with massive pharmaceutical corporations.
Right. Green announces the end of the traditional entertainment model. The era of theaters, screens, and digital projections is over.
You aren't going to buy a ticket to watch the digital avatar of Robin Wright in an action movie anymore.
No. Miramount has synthesized the concept of Robin Wright into a chemical compound. You are going to go to the pharmacy, buy a vial of Robin Wright, drink it, and your brain will synthesize the experience of being her.
The studio has entirely bypassed the optic nerve in the screen. They're directly colonizing the human brain.
The consumer becomes the movie. You ingest the formula and you experience the synthesized emotions, the thrills, the romance of the avatar, all playing out within the theater of your own chemically altered mind.
It is the ultimate commodification of experience.
Now, obviously, we aren't drinking movies out of vials yet.
Not quite yet. But I want to push on this idea because the metaphor is almost painfully applicable to our current technological moment. An article from Film Obsessive titled "The Congress and the Slow Dissolve of Reality" draws a direct line between the film's chemical avatars and our modern relationship with augmented reality and social media algorithms.
The parallels are robust and deeply unsettling. The mechanisms of psychological manipulation portrayed in the film are already actively deployed in the architecture of modern technology.
We don't need an ampoule of hallucinogens to alter our perception of reality. We have the smartphone, the algorithmic feed, and the AR headset.
Think about the daily use of Instagram filters or TikTok beauty algorithms. We literally look at a screen and overlay a digital mask onto our physical faces to remove blemishes, alter our bone structure, and present a flawless, hyper-real version of ourselves to the world.
We are already deeply uncomfortable with our physical reality, and we are using technology to augment it.
The Film Obsessive piece points out that Fullman released this film years before terms like post-truth or the metaverse entered the mainstream lexicon, yet it perfectly captures the underlying psychology of the metaverse.
When a tech billionaire proposes a future where we all strap screens to our faces to work, socialize, and play in a completely fabricated digital environment, they are selling the exact same escapism as the crypto-democracy.
It's the exact same pitch.
But I have to ask, is it really a tragedy?
What do you mean?
Let's say I put on a VR headset and it transports me from my cramped, noisy apartment to a serene digital beach. My heart rate drops. I feel happy. My brain is releasing dopamine. The dopamine is biologically real, even if the beach is not.
Right.
If the technology makes us genuinely happy, why should we cling to a miserable physical reality just because it's authentic?
That is the most dangerous, seductive question the film raises. And it is the exact logic the crypto-democracy relies upon. To answer it, Fullman ensures the film never loses sight of its emotional core.
Amidst all this dizzying philosophical debate and visual chaos, Robin's character remains fiercely tethered to a singular human objective.
She isn't at the Congress to embrace the utopia. She is desperately searching for her son, Aaron.
And Fullman uses a recurring, beautiful visual motif to represent this connection. The kite.
The kites are so striking.
Throughout the film, both in the somber live-action opening and in the chaotic animated zone, we see these bright red Cody kites.
Named after Samuel Franklin Cody, right?
Exactly, the early pioneer of manned flight. Aaron builds and flies these large, complex box kites.
The kite is the central dialectic symbol of the movie. Consider the physics and the purpose of a kite. It is an object designed to ascend, to defy gravity, to reach up into the clouds.
Symbolically, the kite represents the limitless potential of the human imagination.
Yes, the desire for transcendence and the euphoric freedom promised by the chemical avatars in the digital realm.
But a kite cannot fly on its own. It requires wind, yes, but more importantly, it requires a string. It has to be tethered.
Precisely. If you cut the string, the kite does not fly free. It loses its tension, spirals out of control, and crashes to the ground.
It needs that anchor.
The kite's ability to soar is entirely dependent on its anchor to the physical earth, to the hands of the person holding the spool. Fullman is using the kite to represent the human mind in the age of augmented reality.
The mind can soar into these incredible digital hallucinatory spaces, but it must remain tethered to physical reality. It must remain tethered to the physical body, to human relationships, to love, and inevitably to suffering.
Robin's love for Aaron is her string. It is the only thing keeping her from dissolving entirely into the chemical fantasy of Abraham City.
While the rest of humanity is joyfully obliterating their identities to become cartoon deities, Robin fights through the hallucinations.
Desperately trying to maintain her sense of self so she can find the real physical Aaron. The film argues that a life without the tether of physical reality, without the friction of human suffering, isn't a life at all. It is just a numb, floating dream.
And her search leads to a devastating revelation. I won't describe every twist of the third act, But eventually, Robin discovers the horrifying truth behind the animated zone.
The physical world hasn't been cured or saved by technology.
It has been completely abandoned.
The real world is a freezing, ruined, dystopian slum. The cities are collapsing, people are lying on cots in massive warehouse-like clinics, physically wasting away, shivering in the cold.
But their minds are locked in the chemical ether. Because they are taking the drug, they don't feel the cold or see the ruins. They perceive themselves to be in a vibrant, perfect paradise.
The government doesn't have to fix the world. They just have to drug the population into ignoring its destruction.
And Robin finally learns what happened to Aaron. Facing the total terrifying loss of his sight and hearing from Usher syndrome, the physical world became a place of absolute sensory isolation for him.
So he made the choice to cross over. He took the drug.
He abandoned his failing physical body to live permanently in the animated zone, where he could see brilliant colors, hear perfectly, and fly his planes.
Which brings us to the profound, lingering dilemma that concludes our deep dive. Let us reflect on the massive narrative arc we have just traversed.
We started by looking at a film that functioned as a razor-sharp, eerily accurate critique of corporate Hollywood.
It prophesied the digital greed of the studios, the desire to own human likenesses via AI, and the existential threat to physical labor.
The threat that erupted from fiction into reality during the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strikes.
And from that grounded labor critique, the film mutated into a sprawling psychedelic warning inspired by Stanislaw Lem.
It explored the psychology of the crypto-democracy and the slow dissolve of reality in a hyper-technological age.
It showed us a future where humanity, faced with systemic decay and physical frailty, chooses mass self-medication through customized AR hallucinations.
Ultimately, the Congress is a melancholic cry for the preservation of friction. It argues that our uncontrolled feelings, our aging bodies, and our physical vulnerabilities are the very things that generate empathy and meaning.
By attempting to use technology to erase suffering and curate perfect realities, we risk erasing our own humanity.
However, the film is a masterpiece because it refuses to provide a simple, didactic, moral conclusion. It does not entirely condemn Aaron for choosing the dream.
It understands his pain.
And that leads me to the final thought I want to leave you with. This isn't just a hypothetical problem about movies and drugs. Think about the stated goals of modern tech companies right now.
We have billionaires investing billions into brain-computer interfaces, like Neuralink.
Right. The explicit stated goal of these technologies is to eventually bypass our physical sensory organs entirely, to write data directly to the brain.
It is the technological realization of Lem's pharmacology.
Exactly. In 1974, the philosopher Robert Nozick proposed a famous thought experiment called the experience machine. He asked, if you could plug your brain into a machine that would simulate any experience you wanted, flawlessly, and you would never know you were in a machine, would you plug in for the rest of your life?
Nozick argued most people wouldn't, because we inherently value doing things in reality over just experiencing them in a simulation.
But the Congress challenges Nozick optimism.
It really does.
So here's the question for you to mull over. As our physical world faces massive climate, economic, and social crises, as reality becomes increasingly stressful and painful, if a tech company offers you a direct neural link to an eternal, flawless, customized digital paradise, will you refuse the connection to stay in the ruins?
If the beautiful lie harms no one and ends your suffering, is Nozick wrong?
Is the simulation actually the rational choice? How strong is your tether?
It is a question that moves from the realm of science fiction into imminent reality with every passing day.
See you in the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Check out the video description for the letterbox list with all the movies we've covered in this series. See you on next video. Bye-bye.